Good day, faithful students. Your instructor, Mr. Alberhaski, has asked me, Professor Pontificate, to come talk to you today about the 4 motivations for film material. Such a charming man, his request I could not deny. So the topic of this brief lecture is how viewers make sense out of narrative material. As we watch films, we're constantly looking for justification for the material that we see on the screen. Who is this character? Why is she here? What is she doing? Where will her choices lead her? What are her goals? Will she succeed or fail? Now, you may not utter such questions aloud while you're watching a film. In fact, I would not recommend doing so, especially in a crowded theater. But it is precisely such questions that our meaning-making apparatus are trying to answer. Typically, filmmakers oblige that very human desire to know what is going on in a story and why. But occasionally, a filmmaker may challenge his or her audience by denying them solutions to these basic questions, like who are these characters, what are they doing, and why? When filmmakers do this, they tend to raise the blood pressure, if not the indignation, of most viewers. Filmic material can be justified according to 4 different motivations, the first of which is compositional. When viewers make sense out of film material based on compositional motivation, it means that they're relating the material to a cause and effect level of a plot's trajectory. For example, in the first shot, a character might be talking on the phone. We hear her suggest to her friend on the other end of the line that they should meet for lunch. The film abruptly cuts to this character at a table in a restaurant looking at a menu and glancing up at the front door to see someone walking in. Now, the viewer should have very little difficulty understanding why the character is seated at the table, looking through a menu and glancing up at the front door, because the first shot clearly sets us up for the second shot. A causal relationship exists between shot 1 and shot 2. The line of dialogue, "Let's meet for lunch," is clearly the cause, and the character at the restaurant is its effect. Now, this is a very simple-minded example, but essentially plot is developed this very way, through a series of cause and effect relationships that guide the viewer through the story step by step. The second level of motivation is called realistic motivation. On this level of motivation, viewers account for story material by gauging it with reality. When engaging with this level of motivation, a viewer might say to himself, well, of course the character would act that way. He's that type of person. So what we're saying in this instance is that characters in fiction act like people we know in reality. If we believe a character to be a jerk, he will act like a jerk. If we believe a character to be kind-hearted, we're not surprised when we see her help an elderly man across the street. Now, some of you may have watched a movie with someone who seems only capable of accounting for story material through the realistic lens. Those people are apt to say over and over again, oh, that could never happen in reality. The next time you hear them say that, you can gently suggest they seek a different motivation for justifying the narrative material. Now, the third level of motivation for narrative material is called transtextual. Transtextual means that the motivating factor for the filmic material can be attributed to something outside of the context of the film or the text. 2 common examples of transtextual motivations are genre rules and a star's persona. Each genre has its own set of rules, and these, of course, evolve throughout a genre's history. But sometimes characters act in certain ways that have absolutely no bearing on reality and are not relevant to the plot at hand. But only do so because it's germane to some genre rules. For example, in the Western, there's bound to be a barroom brawl, regardless of how tangential it is to the story's composition, and as a viewer we will buy into the barroom brawl whether or not it's congruent with the depiction of the characters or motivated by the causal sequence of the plot, simply because barroom brawls are germane to the Western genre. In the horror film, the bosomy co-ed will run upstairs instead of outside of the house and directly to the police station when the killer is chasing her, not because it's realistic, but that's because that's what characters do in a horror film. In the musical genre, characters suddenly break out into carefully choreographed song and dance sequences, not because that's what most of us do on our way to work, but that's what viewers expect from characters in a musical genre. The star's persona is the second type of common material for transtextual motivation. Stars such as Jim Carrey, Adam Sandler, or even Robert De Niro in certain roles may act in certain ways that have no bearing on the plot or are not realistic to the ways that people act in reality, but they're an acceptable part of the film simply because those actors have developed a persona that viewers are accustomed to and have either grown to enjoy or maybe not, depending on personal taste. The fourth and final motivation is called artistic motivation. A convenient way to define artistic motivation is to say that if you can't account for the filmic material by one of the other three motivations, then most likely what you're dealing with is artistic motivation. Most films that include material that's artistically motivated come from the tradition of the European art cinema, the movement that started after World War II with Italian neorealism. The European art cinema is a director-centered cinema, hailing the writer-director as the auteur or the author of the film. The European art cinema tends to be more open to experimentation than classical Hollywood cinema, and in this sense, the material that's artistically motivated exists for its own sake, to showcase the artistry of the author. For an example of artistically motivated material, consider Nicholas Roeg's 1971 film Walkabout, a film about two British children who get lost in the Australian outback, and on the brink of dehydration, fortuitously encounter an Aborigine boy who saves their lives by showing them how to survive in this hostile climate. While on hunt, Roeg cuts from the Aborigine stalking and killing his prey in the wild to a butcher methodically chopping meat in his pristine butcher shop. Now, the butcher is not a character in the film. He's not been established in the diegesis prior, nor is this a flash forward, because he does not reappear in the film again. So this fact eliminates both compositional as well as realistic motivations. And Roeg is not working inside of a genre, so there's no rules that he's following. Instead, what we have here clearly is an artistically motivated cut. Of course, the cut is metaphorical, emphasizing the dialectics of civilization versus wilderness, a key theme in the film. But the point at hand is that the shots of the butcher are an obvious intrusion of the author into the film's diegesis, the story world, to make an intellectual point and to showcase his artistry. And in the opinion of this professor, the results are quite effective. I must bid you farewell, students. I'm off to the life of the mind. Until next time, should you have any questions, please consult your instructor, a rather generous man, Mr. Alberhaski.